both Ralf and Douglas for this introduction, this comprehensive introduction to the concept and approach of the missions. Really, really interesting. I don't know if there are questions from the public. I kindly remind you that we are both on web streaming on Open Innovation platform, but there are also attendees and participants in our Zoom room. This event is promoted and organized by Lombardy region in collaboration with Bassetti Foundation, which also coordinated the scientific and operational activities of the forum during these 3 years. I see in the chat some flag. We don't have from YouTube because also we have the web streaming through our YouTube channel, Bassetti Foundation channel. I don't know if there are some questions, comments, or requests for clarifications from our attendees in the Zoom room. Perhaps in the meantime, I have just 2 hands. I don't know who was the first, David Winikoff or Luis Mayo.
Luis, go ahead.
So who is the first?
Luis,
David, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. First of all, thank you for this this nice schematic account of missions and some putting forth a kind of normative or prescriptive viewpoint on what will make missions successful. I have a couple of...
Oh no, we've missed the question. David, come back.
He was frozen.
He's frozen.
Yeah, David is frozen. Perhaps, Luis, we can go ahead with you in the meantime, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have the first thing I'd like to say is that this is a very good systematic approach to mission-oriented policies, so innovation policies. So I think it's very good to have ideas organized like this. So thanks for that. But I have basically 2 things. One of them you I think approached it at some point, which is for politicians. One of the very attractive points on mission-oriented policies is that they are very easier to communicate to the public. So the public sees what is this for. And my first question is that, since you said, and I completely agree, that it's essential that the mission is very well formulated, how much this can hinder the good formulation of a mission? That's one question. The second question is about science and technology policies. So we are used to technology development policies, and let me make almost a cartoonish mission and say the mission is organizing a happy wedding. So you worry about a number of things: the dressing of the cake, the plates, how they are in the table, what forks people use, the flowers they want to see, etc. And there is the cake. And of course, if the cake fails, the wedding fails because it was very nice, but the cake was not good. But on the other hand, the development of a very good cake could be related to the need of the other mission making cake available to everybody so that you can buy it in the supermarket. And so how do you articulate this cake development? My question is, shouldn't you have cross-cutting, so that would cut across the missions and well-articulated technology development policies? That was my question.
This is interesting. I mean, the second point, particularly for me, in terms of technology policies, technology strategies, particularly when you're looking at enabling technologies, is, well, okay, you can see that they fit and may contribute to many different missions. So what about that sort of coordination? Rather than mission-centric, we're looking at technology-centric, but through across the whole of the different missions. I mean, I don't have an answer to that. I don't see, from my study of mission-oriented policies around the globe, much in that area. Do you, Ralf?
No, but the point is well made, because indeed that is an issue we did run into when we were looking at the 12 German missions, because studying them a bit closer, some of the missions actually could potentially have some, how should I put it, some contradictions and some tensions between them, because what one mission wants to achieve is actually at the detriment of the other, and vice versa. But there are, of course, also the more positive possibilities, like that one mission success actually also supports a neighboring mission, for instance, and that they kind of support each other, which would be a wonderful complementary approach. So what we did see as a need is a kind of a meta governance for mission policy, once you are actually in the process of implementing a whole range of missions. That is definitely something to take into account and think about how could that work within your specific context, within your specific political system. I think it's going to be difficult to find a one-size-fits-all approach to that, but the message would be if you are working or implementing a number of missions, also think about how they work together and what the possible frictions are between these, and maybe also the complementaries. But maybe just also in terms of the other question you posed in terms of mission formulation. Indeed, that's a good point. I think that is a positive thing, that it is comparatively easy to communicate what you can do with a mission. But we also observe that some policymakers do shy away of becoming very concrete. I mean, a very general goal is easily formulated, but being specific and saying, well, we will achieve a number XYZ in the year, I don't know, 2032. There is, of course, the risk of not achieving the mission, and then what will that mean in terms of the public debate that will spur? So there is a risk on the side of the policymakers to actually go down that road. That's definitely something to keep in mind. Yeah.
If I may add, these are certainly 2 extra slides for our presentation, Ralf, next time we give it, because this kind of resonance between different missions, let's call it that way, because there does need to be some kind of management, because some missions will not be pursued, and you have to have a reason why they are not being pursued. But also this whole idea of technocentric and how it connects the portfolio of missions. I think that's a slide that we need to develop, Ralf, in our talk and back it up.
Mm.
Thanks a lot. Perhaps David Winikoff is again with us. And I don't know if David...
Sorry, and I missed the last question and got kicked out of the Zoom. So let me pose the question now again, maybe better formulated after a few minutes. The question is really relating to the relationship between early stage technology policy, emerging technology policy, and missions. And you draw a distinction between accelerator type versus transformative types. You have a continuum of kind of where there should be political involvement or where there's governance challenges. I help direct the secretariat of a working party at the OECD on emerging technology. And we're trying to figure out the impact and implications of missions for some of the policies that we're developing. In fact, this is one of the themes of a conference coming up in December. And so it seems like the implication was you don't see necessarily a role for missions style policy intervention in the early stages of technology. Whereas I might say, well, that's precisely the stage of technology where it's possible to shape the directions of research and shape emerging technology. But I wondered if you could or might reflect on that question.
I have a response, Ralf.
Go ahead, please.
Shall I start? No, I agree with you, David. Of course, we exchange on this. I mean, in the background of the example I gave from the zero pesticides, that is early stage research anticipating on transformative change, system change. And the presentation of the accelerators and transformer type is a diagnosis of what we see today in terms of mission-oriented policies. So this is the kind of typology that we're seeing. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ralf, but there are other elements emerging, and we're part of it. I think the key issue, and it's an element, I think, a discussion that you missed, David, from Luis's point when you said, well, okay, emerging technologies connect with many different missions. So how do you kind of look at mission-oriented policy and coordination and consultation with emerging technology policy? That's a key issue. And we didn't have an answer for Luis, but my answer to you, David, is yes, there needs to be this anticipatory governance, certainly, but the focus should be really on, well, it depends where you stand. If you stand on at the management of research and innovation programs for early stage technologies, you build capacities in those programs and at the project level to bring the governance in there. At a higher level, there are different types of capacities for developing those policies. And this is the issue that Luis brought up about STI policy that looks at new and emerging tech, and STI policy that's looking at missions. How do you really connect those dots? So not really an answer, but just echoing your point. Ralf, do you want to jump in?
It's not. I haven't thought it through yet because it's a really important question David is posing here. Part of the answer would probably be is that we are probably looking at a kind of a system of nested governance levels here. You have this governance of the mission itself, but nonetheless, things within, for instance, research processes, research performing organizations, they still have their own governance approaches in place, and ideally they would have like some anticipatory capabilities involved there as well, as Doug just mentioned. So this does not exclude, one doesn't exclude the other. Another way of thinking of it is that particularly these accelerator missions we were talking about, there you basically see very like empirically you can see different missions. Sometimes the mission already knows which technology or technological solution we want to pursue. That decision has already made. If it is right or not is another question, but for the mission itself, this decision has been made, and the aim of the mission is then to bring it into application, for instance, and to overcome certain barriers. But there are also missions that are actually looking at things from the other side and say, well, we have a certain problem, but we don't know yet how to solve it. What would be the right technological solution to that? And then the whole mission design becomes a very different form. So, and yeah.
If I might add, because when we were preparing this talk, Ralf and I had some slides that we took out and left, some that we left in, and some that we took out kind of addressed this point about, the nested governance. But of course, one point that we put in our presentation was about the flexibility of the whole mission-oriented policy and its implementation. So behind that is the coordination and consultation between those different nested layers of governance. How do you do that and facilitate that to have flexibility around missions, which may be modified as you move on, and they have to be modified legitimately? So how do you do this? And so this is really the elephant in the room. We're not talking about, we're ignoring, is about the coordination between all these different layers of governance. Because if missions are going to work, that's needed too.
Thank you a lot. Any other comments or questions from the public, from the attendees in the Zoom room? I have a question from you, just to have a very brief and very rough recap of this new formulation of the mission. The concept is no new, but in this new formulation, also thanks to the idea and the formulation of Mariana Mazzucato, there are new elements. We have the focus more on grand and societal challenges instead of technological challenges. We have to rethink and reshape the governance structure, especially if we are talking about transformative missions. The more we are bolder, the more we are transformative, the more we need to rethink the governance in terms of procedures, in terms of departments, in structure, in the policy making, and the idea of legitimacy and buy-in of all the stakeholders involved, so whoever has a stake in the mission. But I think, and you have mentioned a lot, this idea of involving stakeholders at large level. This is my personal interest, as you know, Ralf and Douglas. The main novelty on this new formulation of the missions is the involvement of citizens in all the stages of the mission. So starting from the design part, so in setting the agenda of the mission and the mission projects, so working with the citizens in defining what are the general idea of the missions and the missions projects grounding in the local and territorial level, working with them in co-creating possible solutions, responses to the technological and social parts of the missions, but also involving them in the co-evaluation and co-assessing, creating together indicators to really assess the success of this mission. I think this is a relevant point, and we have experience, tested methods and approaches, especially for the co-design and for the co-creation. We have a lot of examples coming from deliberative democracy, for instance, and technology assessment for the co-design. We have a lot of initiatives in co-creation, working in the realm of social innovation, but also in producing and co-creating technological innovation products, services, and we have more. We have less elements, less experience in co-evaluation. So it's experimental also in this, the approach, the new approach of the mission. So I would like to know a little bit more from you about this, about the involvement of citizens and the role in the mission, because I think it's really key.
Angela, you go straight for the throat. Look at all these things. No, I agree totally. I mean, I have some comments. Ralf, do you want to jump in? I have a few.
I mean, I might just disappoint you a little bit, Angela. I mean, normatively, I fully agree. I think this is important, and I try to also argue that it is absolutely important to do these participatory exercises involving people that eventually will be affected by the mission policies, because otherwise you will run into a number of problems. However, it kind of also depends on the mission. There are some missions where where I'm not sure if it really makes sense to involve citizens. It's much more important to involve the stakeholders. And just one example, there are missions out there trying to decarbonize the cement industry. And this is quite a technical thing, and needs to change, kind of the whole production process and a number of things in this complicated matter. But the role of citizens will be rather narrow compared to other missions, where in my view, the intensive involvement of citizens is absolutely necessary. So I think it really depends on what type of objective we're looking at. Just another point on that. I know this is probably terribly boring to most of you, but I think it's important nonetheless. In the German case, there were a number of participatory fora involved in the implementation of these 12 missions I mentioned previously. really excellent stuff. They were called regional dialogues, where you went into different German regions and had dialogues with a broad set of stakeholders and citizens and lay people discussing certain issues like changes in the mobility system and what have you not. The problem there was these activities were more or less detached of the actual policymaking processes on the side of the department in charge. So we had great activities going on, but the linkage to the actually policymaking processes was not there, and actually. It is not easy to establish an effective linkage because the way most departments operate, this is not foreseen. This is not part of their modus operandi, and this links back to the capabilities and capacities where we were mentioning a couple of times that governments need to think about how can we actually accomplish this? How do we integrate these citizen views into our daily workings? And that's not easy.
Yeah, the absorptive capacity is key. And, I mean, I'll try to be more hopeful, Angela, in my response, is that, unusually so, is I can disentangle what you're saying into four kind of elements around missions. One is about mission definition and the type of role that citizens engage in defining the missions. We see experiments, maybe not so successful, maybe it will improve, but on deciding what the mission should be, and what policies should be pursued. The other one is about mission implementation, actually doing the missions, actually delivering the knowledge creation and invention. And you can see all sorts of opportunities there. And depending on which mission, as Ralf said, there'll be a different degree of involvement. But, on taking the European 5 missions, citizens in cancer would translate more into patients' involvement. So the role of citizens would be more specific. In smart, climate neutral and smart cities, you can see multiple roles for citizens in the production of new knowledge, as we've seen in lots of co-creation activities, and also in co-invention of certain things. And so in terms of implementation, you can see a lot already that can be drawn. The question is to link it into this mission idea. The mission evaluation, so evaluation of the policy and evaluation of actually the implementation, are two slightly different things. And I would say that evaluating the policy would be mission appraisal, and that in terms of parliamentary TA and these kind of things, there's an opportunity for parliamentary technology assessment to really look at appraising these policies and these implementation activities, to see, at a distance, whether they what citizens think and how supportive they are and what they should be. And in terms of evaluation, this is the key thing, isn't it? How can you, in real time, evaluate mission implementation and have citizens involved in that? Because if we're serious about co-creation within these missions and citizens are involved, they should have a say in what criteria of success are embedded in that co-creation activity. So usually we see firms taking the lead with citizens at the early stages and then somehow being separated from certain co-creation activities. What would be interesting would be to integrate in the co-creation activity, so down on the ground, mission implementation, co-development of performance indicators. What would be a successful outcome of those co-creation activities? So that's very, very micro level stuff, but you can imagine that can percolate up. And so it depends on all these different connections between this nested governance. So there's a lot of opportunity for researchers like me to dig into those details and play with different projects.
Thanks a lot, both. Yes, definitely to have a solid, robust and meaningful citizen engagement process, you need to connect to the policy-making part. Otherwise, it's just for the sake of public engagement. You need to have results that are actionable for the policy-making. Otherwise, of course, this can be a problem also in terms of trust and in the relationship between society, institutions, and all the stakeholders involved in such processes. So I don't know if there are any other questions. I saw a question from David Winikoff in the chat. I don't know if Ralf and Douglas would like to briefly comment on for the public. I can read the comment by David Winikoff, a point that doesn't come up. You see the possible diminution of the importance of STI policy in the missions context, but I would rather say it requires a shift in how we imagine the capacity of STI to engage with other policy areas. We need ministry actors to engage STI policy and stakeholders and vice versa. The relative strength of role also will depend on the mission and also on the stage of technology.
Very well put. Very well put. I would agree. Good point. But maybe just a comment on that. Indeed, this is an issue that I think is going to be might be difficult for some mission owners out there. As I think I said previously, in most cases we are observing missions are at the moment brought forward by ministries in charge of science, technology, innovation policy. Depending on the country, of course, sometimes it's the research ministry, sometimes it's the ministry for the economy. Whatever it is, the relative role of science and technology and innovation, at least in the more ambitious missions that have a transformative element in them, will be relative and will be relatively shrinking, I would suppose, and other sectoral policies will become more important. But I think this is not a message of despair. I think this is something because if I put my hat on and I were a member of a ministry of research, for instance, I could well argue that while STI policy is maybe not the key in this mission, but without certain scientific solutions and technological elements in this, the mission won't fly either. So this is I think they have good reasons to argue that involving science, technology, and innovation is absolutely essential. Even though alone they won't be able to reach the mission goals, but without them, it's going to be equally difficult. Yeah.
I think also for me it depends on where you're standing. I mean, I'm quite ambidextrous because I work down at the floor where new knowledge has been produced and innovations have been created, and also I look at policies to shape this. If you look at on the floor where the new knowledge has been produced and innovation has been created, then it's about timing, isn't it? At early stages, different ministries have different roles, and at later stages in that innovation journey or that transformation path that innovation may create. And so, I mean, take the zero pesticides. We see the Ministry of Education and Research working with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Transition, Sustainable Transition in short. But then, as we progress, and it's part of the anticipation in that program, if we really consider that new approaches to reduce pesticides will be implemented, you certainly will see destabilization issues as the system is being transformed and other ministries at play. To enable that mission to succeed, you'll have the Ministry of Employment, you have all sorts of the Ministry of Finance, you have different forms of regulation coming in. So again, if you're standing at the point of the innovation journey, let's call it that, at early stages, certain ministries will be more prevalent than others, but certainly they have to be involved in the anticipation, because the whole idea is to start now and to achieve a mission there in the future where these different ministries need to somehow create joined-up policy that will last. And one key issue that we do not discuss is the policy cycle. And these missions are usually about 20 to 30 years long. So how do we create not only present connections between different ministries, policy areas, but also some continuation through these different natural rhythms of a turnaround in the ministries.
Thank you. Talking about journeys, in our journey of the webinar series in dialogue with the Regional Forum for Research and Innovation, the frequent travelers know that this is the occasion also to present a little bit the activities of the forum. in these 3 last years. And at the very start of the pandemic, the Lombardy region was the first region in Europe struck by the contagions and the outbreak of COVID-19. And the forum was ready and proactive in providing to the regional government a set of flash recommendations to cope with the emergency, but also thinking about the recovery phase. Of course, focusing on its role on suggesting activities and action for the responsible governance of research and innovation that, of course, were and are still key for coping with the pandemics and the recovery phase. So I asked to Ralf and Douglas to tell us a little bit about this recommendation and what were the main ideas behind this fresh recommendation for the Lombardy regional government.
Yeah. Should I start, Doug?
Yeah, go for it.
Just a few thoughts. Indeed, I mean, of course, this was a dramatic situation for all of us, but particularly, of course, for northern Italy, and of course, the forum has members from the region itself, but also a number of people outside the region, and we were actually very concerned about the situation, and we're actually hoping that this flash recommendation would be some kind of support to the regional actors. I think the key issue in such a situation is that you have this element of urgency that was really troubling all of us, and you have to make decisions under extreme pressure on the one side, and at the same time you don't have the sufficient information. You have to decide under uncertainty. And so what we try to do, correct me, Doug, if I'm wrong, but we try to provide a little bit of guidance in terms of how to approach a governance situation like that. And for instance, despite all this dramatic situation, really try your best to be transparent about your decision making, be transparent about the information sources you're using. I think these are important elements we try to involve here and kind of provide some advice to the decision makers in the region. Doug?
Yeah, I mean, remember the time in Paris, we weren't too far behind Lombardy in this crisis. We were at the forum, many of us have children, we were working through the night, and Angela's nodding there, she's with children, young children as well. And we came together to try to see, well, okay, how can responsible approaches to research and innovation, our experiences from the forum, how can we mobilize that to identify areas of concern and areas of opportunity where some of our insights could really inform the region during this panic time of the early stages of pandemic. So what we did was, we have a number of members, there are 10 of us in the forum, some from Italy itself, from the region itself, and some from around the world, like Ralf, myself, Dave Gaston. And so we shared our experiences, what we're seeing, and just put our heads together to see, well, what are the elements to consider during this time of crisis? And so I've got the recommendations open here, so I can give you a few tasters of the sort of things we talked about. So one was about citizen-led initiatives. We saw at the early stages when there was shortages in some of the protective material around, face masks, and also remember the ventilators as well. We saw that there were initiatives, bottom-up initiatives, to create and share these things, facilitated by new technologies, which Louis should be knowledgeable about, from additive manufacturing and 3D printing, which enabled the production, a distributed production of some of these things, which we thought was fascinating. And it showed the role of citizen-led or stakeholder-led, whatever you want to call it, but community-led initiatives to create solutions or try to work together. And so one of our recommendations was how to really leverage and work with citizen-led initiatives. I mean, one recommendation was work with these initiatives during these times, because there is a lot of knowledge distributed that you can mobilize already. And so that was just one flavor. Another one was about incorporation and building trust. Remember, at those early stages, very little was known. A lot of decisions were being made. And so we gave some advice on how to maintain trust with the citizens through our policies and measures. So we mobilized different insights from our experience from responsible research and innovation to inform how you could create and maintain that trust and what are the potential pitfalls that may be coming up. So Angela, those are just some of the ideas that came from the forum.
Thanks a lot for this brief recap and presentation of the flash recommendations. And thanks a lot. We are running out of the time, so I think it's time to close up this meeting. Of course, first, I would like to thank a lot Ralf Lindner and Douglas Robinson for their joint presentation on mission policies. We know that this is a key feature, a key word also for the policies across the Europe, but also beyond the limits of Europe, and I think can be very inspiring for the regional policymakers and regional stakeholders in drafting their own mission-oriented approaches for the local territory. Thanks a lot to all the attendees and the participants in this meeting. Thank you very much. I wish you a lovely continuation of the day.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great to see you.